everyone, a very warm welcome to the thorough newspaper analysis for 2 days, which is the 30th of November and the 1st of December. Now, let's quickly have a look at the agenda for today. First, for the editorial segment, we have an Indian Express article which essentially deals with an episode coming from an agriculture university in Kashmir, which relates to the invocation of the UAPA. Now, in this article, we're going to understand how this particular act is used by the government and how this act originated and what have been some of the very important amendments which, as per the article, have made this particular legislation more draconian and very stringent. Now, secondly, we talk about the news updates for the day, and this is going to be followed by the legal news of the day. So without further ado, let's start with this article and let's first see the context of it. So on 20th of November, 7 students of an agricultural university in central Kashmir, in a district in Kashmir, they were arrested and booked under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This act, also called the UAPA, it is India's principal law dealing with offences of terrorism and subversive activities. This arrest and the entire machinery of law, it was moved after a complaint was made a day prior by a fellow student who alleged that the student had abused and threatened to shoot him for supporting India during the World Cup final. They also raised pro-Pakistan slogans, which, as per the complaint, created fear amongst the students which were outside or from, outside the regions from outside the UT of Jammu and Kashmir. Defending its action, the Jammu and Kashmir police, it said that it had invoked a softer provision of the UAPA for terrorizing others who may be nourishing pro-India or anti-Pakistan feelings and thus normalizing an abnormal. So in this slides, let's understand what is this law, how has it evolved over the years, and what is the softer provision. See, this act, it gives power to the government to probe and prosecute people for acts of terrorism and to designate an organization as an unlawful association or a terrorist organization and an individual as a terrorist. As far as its origin is concerned, for that we go back to 1961, where it was enacted on the recommendations of the National Integration Council, set up in 1961 to find ways to counter problems that were dividing our country. The next year, the council constituted a committee that recommended the introduction of reasonable restrictions in the exercise of certain fundamental rights. The UAPA, it was primarily enacted to give effect to these restrictions. However, we will notice that in the original form, it did not have explicit mention of terrorism. So how this, activity of terrorism was brought within the ambit of this act, let's understand. In 2004, the act was amended for the very first time, and in its title, this addition was made, and for dealing with terrorist activities. The UPA government back then, actually what happened was that the UPA government, it repealed a very criticized legislation. This was called the Prevention of Terrorist Activities Act. Now with its repeal, there was a void to deal with offences related to terrorism. So in order to address that gap, amendment was brought about in UAPA to include terrorist activities within its ambit. The amendment introduced Chapter 4 dealing with 15 to 23 sections to the statute, which defines the act of terrorism, the punishment for it, and the various activities associated with the same. It also introduced Chapter 5, which deals with proceeds of terrorism and provides for seizure of such proceeds by authorities and the forfeiture of properties owned by those who are accused of terrorism. The government also amended Section 1 of the Act to make illegal acts committed by Indian citizens who are abroad as punishable offences under the law. Section 2, which in the original Act defined unlawful activities as an act which is aimed at secession of a part of India or an act intended to disrupt sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country, the government added the clause which causes or which intends to cause disaffection against India. Now, over the years, however, UAPA it has been amended or it has evolved to such an extent that it can be invoked in situations which prima facie do not appear to be acts of terror. Uh, and by terror, I mean, how it is understood in the common parlance. Now, let's understand how this act evolved post the very unfortunate episode of 2611, which is the Mumbai terror attacks case of 2008. Now, in the aftermath of these attacks, another set of amendments broadened the definition of terrorism in the Act, and it introduced longer incarceration, that is, imprisonment, and more stringent bail conditions. Crucially, a line was added in Section 15, which granted sweeping powers to the government to virtually construe any disruptive act as an act of terrorism. Also, in section 15, in the section which defines terrorism by way of use of explosives or poisons and gases, Parliament introduced a very vague phrase, which is any other means. Now, the arrest of Umar Khalid for participating in anti-CAA protests, it is a primary example of how this amendment has allowed authorities to book protesters under the Act. Punishment for such terror attacks or terror acts, as per Section 16, it can stretch up to an award of death penalty. Section 43, which dealt with which of officers could investigate terror cases, it was further expanded, delegating power to more levels of officers. And most importantly, it extended the duration of police custody from maximum of 15 days to 30 days, and judicial custody period went from 90 to 180 days. The amendment not only ruled out anticipatory bail in cases of terrorism, they also made securing bail after arrest extremely difficult. A new clause said that no court would give bail to an accused if it was satisfied that the accusations made they were prima facie true. Also, interestingly, there is a reverse burden of proof which is placed on the accused. Now, usually what happens is, I'm sure all of us are aware of the fact that in our criminal jurisprudence, the prosecution it has the burden of proving the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt, and for that purpose, it cannot, rely upon the lack of evidence cited by the defense to secure its defense. The sole onus or burden of proof, rather, of proving the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt, it lies on the prosecution, and it is only once that burden is discharged that the accused gives its defense. However, there are certain statutes where Parliament expressly provides for a reverse of this burden of proof, where the accused by the court are presumed to be guilty. So, this is what has happened here. Through Section 43E, it put the burden of proof on the accused if she is found in possession of arms or ammunition which is used in an act of terrorism. The clause said the court would presume that the person had committed the act of terrorism. So the presumption of, innocent until proven guilt is also reversed. Let's understand fake currency terror act case. So in 2012, the UAPA, it was further amended to include economic security of the country in the ambit of terrorism. Under this, the statute went on to designate production, the smuggling and the distribution of counterfeit Indian currency as a terrorist act. Notably, the amendments introduced Section 22A to Chapter 4, where if a company was found involved in a terrorist activity, every person in charge of running the business of the company, they would be held guilty of the offense unless they could prove the act was committed without their knowledge. So there is a vicarious liability, so to say. Now, further insertions through Section 22B and C included trusts and societies with similar provisions for punishment. It is under these sections that news click editor was arrested in October. The amendments also increased the period an organization could remain declared as an unlawful association from a period of 2 years existing to 5 years. Now let's see what were some of the amendments that were brought about in 2019. So in 2019, the current government, which was also in power, with the Narendra Modi government, it pushed through Parliament a controversial amendment in the Act, which gave the government the power to designate an individual as a terrorist. Until then, only organizations could be designated as terrorists, and now an individual can also be put into the same category. So this was criticized as overturning the founding principle of the criminal justice system that presumes innocence until proven guilty for every suspect. The amendment also allowed the National Investigation Agency powers to seize assets belonging to terrorists across the country without seeking consent or even informing the state concerned. It allowed even an NIA inspector to become the investigating officer of a terror case. Earlier, only DSPs could do so. Now, let's understand what is this softer section of this act. So, the students in Jammu and Kashmir, they have been booked under Section 13 of this act. This section deals with the punishment for unlawful activities. The section provides, and I read, whoever A takes part in or commits, B advocates, abates, advises, or incites the commission of any unlawful activity shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 7 years, and it shall also be liable to fine. Section 13 punishes unlawful activities as opposed to terror activities. The latter, as previously mentioned, have far more stringent punishments, including life imprisonment and death penalty. However, even under this section, provisions to do with the custody of accused, they remain applicable, meaning bail it would be hard to come by. And with this, we proceed to the next segment for today. And now with this, we proceed to the national segment for today. And this is the very first update here. CM Naveen Patnaik, he launches Amma Bank to bring nearly 4,300 plus GPs into fold. In a major push to cover 4,300 plus unbanked Gram Panchayats under the Financial Inclusion Program, Chief Minister of Odisha, Mr. Naveen Patnaik, on Tuesday, he launched Amma Bank for providing banking services through customer service points plus banking outlets. The Chief Minister said that the delivery of services to the last mile in a very fair and transparent manner, it has been the highest priority agenda for the state government under 5T initiatives. The CSP plus banking outlets, they will empower the people by providing credit for small businesses. As many as 15 banking services they will be available through these outlets, and steps they have been taken to provide doorstep services to elderly, to the differently abled person and pregnant women. The state government will also bear one-time expenses for fixed costs and reoccurring expenses for a period of 3 years. A provision of rupees 500 crore it has been made for this scheme. Virgin Atlantic, it flies world's first flight which is powered by alternative fuel. A Virgin Atlantic passenger jet which is powered by 100% sustainable aviation fuel, it has successfully completed a London to New York jaunt in an effort to showcase the potential of low carbon options that currently make up a very teeny tiny fraction of the industrial fuel mix. The flight, it is not the first time the industry has staged demonstrations to highlight its aspirations to reduce emissions and appeal for government support. Airlines, they are banking on fuel which is made from waste to reduce their emissions by up to 70%, but the high cost and the tight supply of materials which is needed to make the sustainable aviation fuel, it make large scale productions very difficult. These fuels, the sustainable ones, they amount or account for less than 0.1% of the total global jet fuels in use today, but their cost it is about 3 to 5 times much as irregular jet fuel would cost. The fourth edition of the ASEAN India Group Grassroots Innovation Forum, it was launched to strengthen the STI, which is the science, the technology, the innovation cooperation between India and ASEAN member states. India, along with 10 ASEAN member states, were represented by 200 participants at the fourth edition of the annual ASEAN India Grassroots Innovation Forum that was launched in Malaysia on 28th of November. This forum, it is an annual program which is focused on fostering a strengthened relationship between India and between these member states on the premise of cooperation in science, in technology and innovation. So while on the one side it aims to give exposure, so while on the one hand it aims to give exposure to social innovations in different countries, it also strengthens governance in the grassroots innovation ecosystem. On the sideline of the fourth forum annual meet, the Indian delegation called on to Mr. B.N. Reddy, who is the High Commissioner of India to Malaysia. Odisha to host the ultimate Kho Kho season 2 from 24th of December. So after the inaugural season, it was a very successful one and it reached 164 million households. Ultimate Kho Kho, it is now all geared up for its grand second season or edition, scheduled to kickstart on 24th of December, with the final being scheduled on 13th of January. And this is scheduled at the Jawaharlal Nehru Indoor Stadium in Cuttack in Odisha. Inspired by the Chief Minister's vision of sports for youth and youth for future, the state government it has not only hosted some of the major global sports events in the state, but it has also developed world-class multi-sport infrastructure and sporting experiences for sports enthusiasts from across the state. The Kho Kho League, it is promoted by Amit Burman in collaboration with Kho Kho Federation of India. It is dedicated to reinventing and promoting the indigenous sports in a more dynamic and engaging manner. And to give you an example, the first season, it has emerged as a very successful event, and it is in fact India's third largest non-cricket league in terms of the TV audience reach. Centre approves terms of references for the 16th Finance Commission. The government has approved the terms of reference for the 16th Finance Commission, which makes recommendations on sharing of tax revenues between the centre and the states. The recommendations they would cover a 5-year period commencing on 1st of April in 2026. The Commission would submit its report on 31st of October 2025. The 15th Finance Commission was constituted in 2017 and it made recommendations covering a period of 6 years commencing 2020 through its interim and final reports. The recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission, they are valid up to financial year 2025-2026. The relevant article which provides for the modalities of setting up the Finance Commission, they are given in Article 280, Clause 1. Manipur's oldest armed group, which is the UNLF, it agrees to renounce violence, signs peace accord. The Union Home Minister Amit Shah, he has said that the United National Liberation Front, which is the oldest militant group of Manipur, signed a peace agreement with the center. The extremist organization, it was banned by the Home Ministry earlier. The decision was taken after the center felt that these organizations, they are indulging in attacks on and killing of security forces, of police and civilians in Manipur, as well as activities which are prejudicial to the sovereignty and the integrity of our country. So, what is this organization? Founded way back in 1964, the UNLF, it is the oldest Meitei insurgent group in the northeast state of Manipur. ISRO scientist Lalithambika conferred highest French civilian award. V.R. Lalithambika, the former director of the Directorate of Human Spaceflight Program at ISRO, was honored with the prestigious Legion d'Honneur, which is the highest French civilian award. This recognition, it was bestowed upon her in appreciation of her significant contribution in fostering space cooperation between India and France. This award, it was presented to her by the French ambassador to India on behalf of the French government. Established way back in 1802 by Napoleon Bonaparte, the Legion of Honor, it stands as the highest civilian award which is bestowed by French Republic. It is granted in recognition of exceptional services to France without regard to the nationality of individuals who are receiving this honor. Lalithambika, an accomplished scientist at ISRO, specializes in advanced launch vehicle technology, has notably contributed to various ISRO rockets, with a particular focus on Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, which in the common parlance is called the PSLV. In 2018, while serving as the director of Human Spaceflight Program, she collaborated very closely with the French National Space Agency. She played a key role in facilitating the signing of the initial collaborative agreement between ISRO and its counterpart in France on human spaceflight, enabling the exchange of specialists in space medicine between the two countries. Cabinet approves extending free ration scheme for 81 crore poor people for 5 years. The Union Cabinet on 29th of November, it approved a proposal to extend the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana to provide free food grains to around 81 crore people for 5 years until December 2028. At a cabinet briefing, the Union Minister Anurag Thakur said the extension will cost the exchequer around rupees 11.8 lakh crore. The extension will be applicable from January 1st next year. A decision in this regard was taken in a meeting of the cabinet, which was chaired by the Prime Minister of India on 28th November. Earlier this month, addressing an election rally in Chhattisgarh, the PM said that the center would extend the free ration scheme for 5 years. The scheme was initiated in April of 2020 to assist the poor during the COVID-19 pandemic for 3 months, but it was later extended. Under this free ration scheme, poor families receive 5 kgs of food grains each month. In December last year, the center decided to subsume this particular scheme, launched in 2020 to provide additional food grains free of cost with the National Food Security Act. Union Cabinet approves PM Jan Man scheme for tribal welfare. The Union Cabinet has approved the implementation of the Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan, which is designed to provide support to tribal communities with a budget of rupees 24,000 crore. India's scheduled tribe population stands at 10.45 crore according to the census of 2011, with 75 communities in 18 states and the Union Territory of Andaman and Nicobar Islands classified as the PVTGs. Now, during the commemoration of the Janjati Gaurav Divas in Jharkhand, the Prime Minister had inaugurated the Pradhan Mantri Particularly Vulnerable Tribal Groups, which are called the PM PVTG Development Mission. These interventions fall under the purview of 9 key ministries, which are responsible for health, for livelihoods, tribal affairs, for telecom, among others. Moreover, ministries like Ayush and skill development and entrepreneurship, they will also offer additional support. Hump World WW2, which is World War II, museum opens in Arunachal with US aircraft wreckage on display. So the in India has paid tribute to the hundreds of US servicemen who were killed during the Second World War with the opening of museum near its strategic border with China, honoring the dramatic Himalayan airlift dubbed the Hump. Arunachal Pradesh Chief Minister Pema Khandu, he said it showcased the remnants of the aircraft that went missing as he inaugurates the Hump WW2 museum alongside the US ambassador. Pilots nicknamed the dangerous route over the ice-covered eastern Himalayan mountain the Hump, a giant airlift to supply Chinese troops battling Japanese forces after the cut of the overland route through Burma, which is the current Myanmar. Drift by Anthony Chen, it bags the prestigious ICFT UNESCO Gandhi Medal at IFFI. French, British and Greek co-production Drift, directed by Anthony Chen, it received the prestigious ICFT UNESCO Gandhi Medal at the 54th edition of the International Film Festival of India. The film is an emotional portrait of an immigrant woman who seems condemned to wander by the traumatic and very terrific reality of human madness. The award was announced at the grand closing ceremony of the festival at Goa. Nepal, this has brought us to the international segment. Nepal, it has become the first South Asian nation to register same-sex marriage. Nepal has formally registered the first case of same-sex marriage 5 months after the Supreme Court issued an interim order clearing the way for such marriages in the largely conservative country. With this historic move, Nepal, it has become the first South Asian nation to do so. The marriage between the 36-year-old Ram Bahadur Gurung, who was born male but identifies as a female, with Surendra Pandey, who's 26, who was born and identifies as male, it was formally registered at the Dodi Rural Municipality Office in the Lamjung district in West Nepal. The couple, they have been in a relationship for 9 years and they got married according to Hindu rituals back in 2016 in the capital Kathmandu. In June, this country's Supreme Court issued an interim order allowing same-sex couples to register their marriages pending a final verdict. Taiwan, it is only other country to legalize such marriages in Asia, where societies remain largely conservative. Now here I have a question. Please put down the name of the case which dealt with this particular issue in our country very recently, and broadly just state, what has been the quorum of the Supreme Court as far as the issue of the homosexual couples marriage is concerned. Henry Kissinger, the former US Secretary of State and Nobel winner, he dies at 100. So the former United States Secretary of State, the former United States Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, who shaped the country's Cold War history, he dies at the age of 100 on Thursday. A controversial Nobel Prize winner, he served under 2 US presidents and left an indelible mark on the foreign policy in the United States. In July this year, he made a surprise visit to Beijing to meet the president there. In 1970s, he was the Secretary of State under the Republican President Richard Nixon, and he worked on several global events. A Germany-born Jewish refugee, he led efforts to open diplomatic affairs with China, a landmark US-Soviet armed talks, thickening ties amid Israel and Arab neighbors, and the Paris Peace Accords with North Vietnam. Moving on to the next update. This has brought us now to the legal segment. So first we have the case of Vijay versus Union of India, which comes from the Honorable Supreme Court. If document required to be stamped is insufficiently stamped, then the copy of the document, it cannot be adduced as secondary evidence. This is what the Supreme Court has held. The court has reiterated that if a document that is required to be stamped is not sufficiently stamped, then a copy of such document cannot be adduced as secondary evidence. The bench of the Supreme Court, which is the division bench, it referred to a series of decisions, a category of decisions to observe as thus: if a document is if it is required to be stamped, it is not sufficiently stamped, then the position of law is well settled that a copy of such documents as secondary evidence, it cannot be adduced. The object of the Stamp Act, it is to collect proper stamp duty on an instrument or conveyance on which such stamp duty is payable, the court said. Section 35 of this act, it caters to instruments that are not properly stamped and hence are not admissible in evidence. But if the documents sought to be admitted, they are not chargeable on duty, Section 35 has no application, the court explained, while further adding that to impose the bar of admissibility, which is provided under this section, which is 35, the following two conditions are required to be fulfilled. The first is that the instrument must be chargeable with duty, and secondly, of course, that it is not stamped. Moving on to another Supreme Court verdict. So the Supreme Court, while setting aside the conviction under attempt to murder, gave weightage to two factors. Firstly, the court noted that there were no repeated or severe blows caused. Secondly, the injuries on the victims, they were very simple in nature. Admittedly, there is no allegation of repeated or severe blows having been inflicted. Even the injuries on PW1, which is prosecution witness 1 and 2, they have been found to be simple in nature, which is an additional point in the appellant's favor. As such, the conviction under Section 307, attempt to murder, IPC is unsustainable, the court held. The name of this particular matter is Sivamani and another versus the state, represented by Inspector of Police. And with this, we've come to an end of the TNA. In case you want to get access to the free study materials that we curate or the TNA slides that have been used in this video, I would highly encourage all of you to join our Telegram channel. And for the same, you may scan the barcode here or click on the link which is given in the description. Thank you for being with us.